right, good afternoon. We'll go ahead and call to order the regular meeting for the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals for October 23rd, 2013. First, before we get started, I want to spread some good news. Our minute taker for our meetings had the stork come visit her son's house, I believe, recently, and I know she's proud of it, but wants to announce the birth of a grandson. Is this your first grandson? Okay. Brenda Davis has a new grandson, Arlo William Davis. So we want to congratulate Brenda and her family and wish them all the best. Thank you. All right. And I know Frances Mosby also had some good news this week, too, with some health concerns involving her daughter. So, and she's riding on cloud nine, I believe, right now. Good for you.
Praising God.
All right. We'll next consider the minutes for our regular meeting on September 25th, 2013. Those minutes have been included with our agenda materials. Are there any corrections to those minutes? If not, they stand approved as presented, and we'll now consider some new business. We'll take up sign variance requests first. Our first application there is S13056 by Mr. Tim Dietz, requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4 24A22 of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance, which prohibits a sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement. And this is for property located at 2083 Las Casas Pike. Okay. Ms. Kerr, if you'd review that application for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers, members of the board. The applicant, Mr. Tim Dietz, representing Ron McAfee for Sonic Drive-In, is requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4 24A22 of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance, which prohibits a foundation or sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement without the consent of the easement holder and the Board of Zoning Appeals approval. The sign location is at 2083 Las Casas Pike and is within a planned unit development zone. The applicant is requesting permission to erect one internally illuminated freestanding wall sign with 50 square foot opaque background display area and an overall height of 16 feet. The sign will be located within a 20-foot consolidated utility district water easement. The agreement for a sign in a City of Murfreesboro easement has been signed by the Director of Building and Codes, and a letter of approval from the CUD project coordinator has also been submitted, requesting that the required footing be located at least 10 foot from the existing water line. And due to the sensitivity of the placement, the sign footer in regards to the water line has been located by a Tennessee registered engineer, and a form of a certification of sign placement has been provided. The applicant will comply with all other setbacks and regulations, and I am available to answer any questions as well as Mr. Tim Dietz.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kerr. Any questions from Ms. Kerr? All right, Mr. Dietz, anything you'd like to add to the application? Thank you. All right, then at this time we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing no one, declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
If there's no discussion, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the application.
No second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Mr. Dietz, that application has been approved. Thank you. Nice to see you. All right, next we'll consider application S13057 by Dr. Rajesh Agarwal. He's requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4 24A22 of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance, again prohibiting a sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement. And this is for property located at the intersection of North Rutherford Boulevard and Empire Boulevard in the Kingston Square subdivision. Ms. Kerr.
The applicant, Rashish Agarwal, representing Kingston Square Homeowners Association, is requesting a variance from Section 25 1/4 24A22 of the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance, which prohibits a foundation or sign placed in or over a public utility or drainage easement without the consent of the easement holder and Board of Zoning Appeals approval. The sign location proposed at Kingston Square subdivisions on lots 17 and 18 are located within an RS-15 zone. The applicant is requesting permission to erect 2 externally illuminated freestanding wall signs with 24 square foot of display area and an overall height of 8 feet. And an overall size of the signs would be 88 square feet. The signs will be located within a 40-foot drainage easement. The sign for a City of Murfreesboro easement has been signed by the city engineer and the Director of Building and Codes. The sign locations have been staked and a sign placement certification form have been completed by a Tennessee registered surveyor, and the applicant will comply with all other setbacks and regulations. And the applicant and myself are available to answer any questions that you may have.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Kerr. Any questions for Ms. Kerr? All right. Dr. Agarwal, anything you'd like to add?
It's actually the sign company that's the very idea. Ms. Joan Kellerman is here for that.
Okay. Ms. Kellerman? Anything you'd like to add to the application? All right. Then at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
No questions. I'll make a motion to approve the sign bearer's application.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Ms. Kellerman, that application has been approved. All right. We'll next move on to some variance. Thank you, Ms. Kerr. We'll next move on to some variance requests. There we have application Z13058 by Mr. Steve James of James & Associates Residential Designers for Mr. David Bailiff. He's making the following request for property located in a residential multifamily zone at 404 Hale Avenue. First is a 5-foot variance from the minimum required 25-foot rear building setback for principal structures. Next is an 18-foot variance from the minimum required 30-foot front building setback for principal structures. All right, Mr. Blum, if you'd review that one for us, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Rogers, and good afternoon, Chairman Rogers and members of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Our first variance application today is, as you mentioned, Chairman Rogers, at 404 Hale Avenue, located in between East Burton Street and East Bell Street. Hale Avenue is very short. I believe it's a 2-block long north-south street, just to the north of Central Middle School. There's an existing single-family home on the subject property, and as it sits right now, it is not being occupied, but the applicant has, or the applicant's client, Mr. Bailiff, has recently purchased the house and has drafted plans to improve the house and to build some additions onto the house. The house, as it sits right now, and you can see the aerial photo in front of you, it's a very small lot. The existing house, which was built, I believe in the, in 1947, already encroaches into both the front and rear setbacks. And in the RM12 zoning district, there is a 30-foot front setback and a 25-foot rear setback. The existing house is about 12 feet from the front property line and about 20 feet from the rear property line. There are couple of improvements that the applicant proposes to undertake which would require variances. And you have a copy of the plot plan in front of you which shows the proposed addition on a survey of the property. This is the 18 by 24 sheet that has been laid out at your stations. You'll notice where it is indicated proposed expansion is 20.1 feet away from the rear property line. This is the location where an uncovered deck was previously located. Mr. Bailiff has torn down that deck and in its place wishes to construct an addition which would include a master bathroom, a closet, and a utility room. According to the application materials, there is very limited storage space in the existing home, And so he's kind of, with it being an older home, he's trying to retrofit it to the needs of today's resident. The proposed addition will meet all side setbacks, and the proposed addition, as I mentioned, will be located where there was previously a deck. Now, it is a little bit larger than the footprint of the deck, but it will not encroach any further towards the rear lot line than the existing rear of the house. So you can see on the, if we could pull up the screen, you can see the existing house is situated about 20 feet from the rear property line, and the expansion, which is denoted with the dotted lines, is flush with the rear of the existing house. Now, in addition to this expansion at the rear of the house, the applicant also wishes to cover the front porch, which is currently open. And because the front porch already sits within the front setback, about 12 feet from the front property line, the applicant has to it is required that the applicant apply for a front setback variance in order to cover the front porch, as it is already in the front setback. The size of the lot is approximately 80 feet deep by 60 feet wide. It is roughly 4,795 square feet in area, and current zoning regulations require a minimum of 7,500 square foot lot size in the RM12 zone. So it's a non-conforming lot in that it does not meet the minimum lot size requirements for the RM12 zone. But with that being said, the applicant, according to his calculations, will still be under the maximum lot coverage requirement for the RM12 zone. In the application materials, the applicant indicates that the house has insufficient closet and storage space, and he is trying to update the house to meet the needs of the new homeowner. He points to the fact that both the lot and the house are non-conforming and explaining why the variances are needed. And it does appear that any functional addition to this house would need a variance. As I mentioned, the addition at the rear will be going where there was previously an uncovered deck. And also in your agenda materials, you will notice that there have been some house plans submitted as well. And here are some photographs of the existing structure at 404 Hale Avenue. It's the front of the structure. And you can see the dumpster in the front yard as they've been doing some cleanup work out there. And there's the existing front porch. You see that will be covered, that small front porch. And this is the corner of the house where the deck was previously located and where the proposed addition at the rear of the house will be located. And this shows the rear of the existing house in relation to the rear property line. And the approximate location of the rear property line is where that fence is located. Once again, showing the rear of the existing house in relation to the rear property line. The addition will not protrude out any further than the existing rear of the house. And this is looking at the property to the rear or to the east, the property to the north, the property to the south, and the property directly across Hale Avenue. And with that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Separate motions will be needed for each variance request, and Mr. James is here at the meeting today to answer any questions with regards to this request as well.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions for Mr. Blomley?
Chairman, I just have two. One, if I'm looking at this aerial photo correctly, the lot to the north, this does not look, if we were to approve this, it doesn't look like that the applicant's house would be any further closer to the front lot line than his neighbor is to the north. Would that be a fair statement or not?
I'd say that would be, without knowing the exact measurements,
Right.
I would say that's roughly correct. And then also, the front porch addition or the front porch covering will not expand the footprint at all. It will just cover the existing front porch.
Okay. And then there, with the hatched area of the covered porch, there's no side setback issues, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Is the side setback's 5? there?
Side setback is 5, but the sum of the two side setbacks must equal 15. And so he's got 7.9 on one side and about 10 on the other side.
Gotcha. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Blomley? All right. Mr. James, anything you'd like to add to the application? All right. Good deal. Then at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing no one, declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion. As Matthew said, we've got two components to this application, so we need to take those separately.
If there's no further discussion, I would move to approve the 5-foot variance from the minimum required 25-foot rear building setback.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Now consider the request for the 18-foot variance.
I'll make a motion that we approve the 18-foot variance in reference to the front setback.
I'll second.
Motion and a second there. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Mr. James, that application has been approved in its entirety. Thank you. All right. We'll next consider application Z13059 by Mr. Derek Alcorn. He's making requests for property located in a residential single-family zone at 3327 Robinwood Drive, which is Lot 7 of the Woodlands subdivision. First request is a 7.5-foot variance from the minimum required 12.5-foot side building setback. And then the second request is a 1-foot variance from the minimum required 40-foot front building setback for principal structures. All right, Mr. Blum, if you'd review that one for us, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Rogers. As you mentioned, the property is located at 3327 Robinwood Drive, which is Lot 7 of the Woodlands of Southern Meadows subdivision. If we could pull up the aerial photo, it is the lot that is labeled in yellow as site. This aerial photo was taken in winter of 2012, so as you can see, it was a vacant lot at that point. However, there is a partially completed homes that is or partially constructed home on the lot as it sits today, and I'll show you some photographs of that in just a moment. Mr. Alcorn, who is the applicant, is also the contractor for the house that is currently being constructed. And about a month ago, it was brought to our attention by Mr. Alcorn and the building inspector that the house was being built 1.5 feet from the side property line. In the RS-15 zone, there is a minimum 12.5-foot side setback. So not only was it being built within the 12.5-foot side setback that is required by the city's zoning ordinance, but it was also being built within the minimum 5-foot setback that is required by the city's building code. So the city's building and codes department indicated that Mr. Alcorn needed to stop construction until such time as he was able to find a solution to this issue. And Mr. Alcorn has ceased construction, I believe, except for some things to shore up the existing structure from weather, from the elements. Now, one thing that I'd like to show you to kind of better illustrate this are a couple of exhibits. And you have 11 by 17 of these at your stations. There are two different exhibits. There is the first exhibit, which was provided by SEC, Site Engineering Consultants, of Lots 6 and 7 of the Woodlands of Southern Meadows. And Lot 6, I will mention, at the time that this setback variance or setback violation was discovered, was not in Mr. Alcorn's ownership, but he has since purchased Lot 6 as well. And you can see that the existing house encroaches into the side setback on the east side of the lot, and it is by 11.12 feet. So it is less than 1.5 feet from that existing side lot line. And you can also see at the front of the house there is there are also two encroachments, one of 0.63 feet and the other of 0.59 feet. So after the applicant purchased the lot next door, Lot 6, he began looking at his different options for coming into compliance. And that brings us to the next exhibit, which is the proposed re-subdivision of lots 6 and 7. The applicant tasked his surveyor, SEC, to look at how that adjoining lot line could be shifted in order to at least eliminate some of the violation. And what SEC was able to come up with was the proposed re-subdivision here. And this, the variance request kind of goes hand in hand with the re-subdivision of the property or the shifting of this lot line. So if the side setback variance that I'll go over in just a moment is approved, it would be contingent upon, or we would recommend that it be contingent upon the re-subdivision of this lot. So what the applicant was able to do with his surveyor was to shift that lot line so that it would be that it would meet the 5 foot, that the structure would meet the 5 foot separation requirement by building code. And with that being kind of an important life safety issue, that was what the applicant was tasked with doing first. And in looking at shifting that lot line further to the east, if it was shifted any further to the east, Lot 6 would not be able to meet minimum lot width requirements. So this was as far as the applicant could shift that adjoining property line. So he was able to achieve compliance with the minimum 5 foot separation that the building code requires, but he was not able to shift it far enough to get the 12.5 foot side setback that is required by the zoning ordinance. So, as I mentioned, if the side setback variance request is approved today, it would be subject to the applicant re-subdividing the lot consistent with this exhibit. And to kind of just go into some background as to how we find ourselves at this juncture today, the applicant did not have the property surveyed prior to beginning construction on the house. He erroneously pulled from a property corner that was not the operable property corner. And after this was discovered, he did have SEC survey the property, and it was determined that it was encroaching a great deal into that side setback. As I mentioned, subsequently after the violation was discovered, the applicant did purchase the vacant lot to the east in order to shift the adjoining lot line far enough to bring the structure into compliance. However, he was not able to shift it far enough for zoning compliance, but for building and code compliance. So if this variance is granted, he will no longer need to seek relief from the Construction Board of Adjustment and Appeals, but a setback variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals would still be required, and that's why he is here today. The applicant admits in his letter to the BZA that the present situation is as a result of his own error in misidentifying the side property line. However, he states that he has taken positive steps to improve the situation, including the purchase of the lot next door and the proposed shift of the lot line to ensure that at the very least the structure meets the minimum 5 foot setback that the building code requires for life safety purposes. The applicant also indicates that there was little room for error to begin with because of the 100-foot wide TVA transmission line easement and the 30 to 35 foot wide drainage easement, both of which are on the west side of the lot. These easements take up over 50% of the building envelope, according to the applicant, and force the structure to be located on the east side of the lot. And you can see on the exhibit before you the TVA transmission line easement, and as well as the drainage easement on the west side of the lot. A separate motion is needed for each request. If the board does approve the side setback variance request, staff recommends the following condition: a re-subdivision plat shifting the lot line adjoining lot 6 as shown on the exhibit submitted must be recorded prior to the framing inspection. And what I'll do now is show you some photographs of the property and of the surrounding area. This is the existing structure as it sits today. And this is the side of the house that does encroach into that setback, the side setback. This is the west side of the house. And the neighboring property to the west. The neighboring property to the east. There is a house 2 doors down from the subject lot. And this is looking north across Robinwood Drive. And once again, looking northeast across Robinwood Drive. If the board has any questions regarding this application, I'll be happy to answer them. And also in attendance is Mr. Alcorn and his surveyor, Tom Rosenthal.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Any questions for Mr. Blomley?
I have one. As it's re-subdivided, what we're looking at in after Mr. Alcorn's bought Lot 6 in this re-subdivision plat, Lot 6, as we speak, meets the 12.5-foot side setback. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, Lot 6, no variances have been granted for Lot 6.
All right.
The variance that's requested, though, is one is based on after the property's been re-subdivided, so we're still 7.5 feet into the setback.
That's correct.
Even after the re-subdivision. Okay.
That was the most that it was the furthest that adjoining lot line could be shifted while still allowing Lot 6 to meet minimum lot width requirements.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Blomley? All right, Mr. Alcorn or Mr. Rosenthal, anything you all would like to add to the application?
We just appreciate your consideration in the matter. Sometimes these things happen, and I think Mr. Alcorn has done pretty much everything he can to try to make it, the lot next to it be as effective as little as possible. So I'm hoping this will work out just fine.
I'll tell you, Mr. Rosenthal, if you could come up to the podium here for us and make your comments.
I just wanted to thank you for your consideration and wanted to tell you that we did as much as we could with Lot 6 to make sure that it was it met all the typical side setbacks and the minimum lot width requirements. And Mr. Alcorn, I think, really stepped up to the plate when he bought that other lot so that he wouldn't put any other burdens on adjoining property. So I'm hoping that you'll consider that as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Any questions? All right. Thank you, sir. Then at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would please come forward. State your name and your address for us.
Hi, my name is Jerry Hood. I live at 2145 Slater Drive, which is just around the corner from Robinwood. There are some concerns, especially among some of the neighbors out there, that especially with now that we're talking about rezoning or re-subdividing the property. And we just wanted to make sure that whatever happens, that the outcome is that the structures that are built are still consistent with the structures that are the homes that are already in the neighborhood. In other words, we don't want to see, based on space limitations and so forth and redrawn setbacks, forward-facing garages. That is something that is in the covenants that we should not have. So the question would be, he did buy the other lot next door to sort of mitigate the encroachment, but is there during the re-subdividing of that lot, is there a plan for another structure to be built on that lot? In other words, is he planning on building another home on that lot? And if so, that home, I would assume, would have to meet the same requirements as all the other houses in the neighborhood. In other words, no forward-facing garages, setbacks are all the same. It's just, I'm trying to protect the aesthetics of the neighborhood and the integrity of the neighborhood that we have there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hood. Any questions for Mr. Hood? All right. Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Yes. My name is John Birchfield. I live in Lot 7, 3319 Robin Wood Drive, which is the house directly east of the Lot 6 that's being referred to. In the letter that was sent, it was under my impression that 7.5 feet variance was what we were asking for, only to be within Lot 7. I did not understand that Lot 6 was under a possible subdivision, relining that lot. And my concerns with this is that the lot is already one of the smallest lots in the neighborhood. And I guess one of my questions now is how far was the setback intended? If it was resurveyed, how many feet are we talking about reducing that lot? Number 6.
I mean, the square footage looks like it's, of the lot goes from 15,289 down to 15,169. Is that right, man?
That's correct.
Okay. So we've lost about 120 feet, 120 square feat to the lot.
The minimum lot size is 15,000 square feet. So his surveyor had to make sure that the lot did not dip under that 15,000 square foot minimum lot size.
Okay. So what does that move the line? I guess how many feet is it moving the line from Lot 7 toward 6 or toward the east?
If we can put the exhibit back on the screen. And the lot line where it's a straight line from Robin Wood Drive back to the rear lot line, kind of at an angle, you see it kind of angles in on the back corner of the house that's under construction. And now what the applicant proposes to do is shift it so that it runs more parallel to that the side of the house, and then angles back towards the rear lot line. So we go from this here to this here. So it's actually, whoops, wrong way. Okay, so you see, at the street, it actually appears to be a little bit wider at the street. Is that correct, Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes, it's actually 8 foot wider at the street, Lot 6 is. What we did was, instead of having a line that went at an angle, we made it a little bit more parallel, and then when we widened it out in front, it's actually 70 and a half feet, where it used to be about 62 and a half feet. So
Mr. Rosenthal, if you'll come, we got to catch all this stuff on the record. So if you'll come back up again, I'm sorry.
in order to shift the lot lines to make sure that we have the right square footage, we actually widened the frontage of Lot 6 from 62 feet to about 70 and a half feet, whereas it was more of a pie shape in the beginning. Now it's more parallel lines, and then it kicks back on one end to get that square footage. And actually, it's not, when you look at, it's hard to see on the screen, but looking at the paper here, it's not a very drastic move. And as a matter of fact, I don't think that it's going to be very noticeable from the street or from anywhere else, based on the way we've changed it. I can go to that as well. Are there any other questions for me?
Can you, while you're up there, and Mr. Blomley, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this board cannot govern covenants, correct?
That's correct.
Can we ask the question, though, of the builder if he's going to meet those covenants, or is that an acceptable question?
I believe that would be an acceptable question.
Okay.
Yes.
So while you're there, can you address the first gentleman's question as to whether or not, based upon the re-subdividing these lots, that you will meet the existing covenants of the subdivision?
I would assume that a suitable house plan could be found easily to meet the covenants, yes.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Birchfield, anything you wanted to add?
I've got some bigger drawings if you want to take a look as well. I can leave them with you if you like.
So it's my understanding that if the variance is allowed on number 7, then there's still another part of this process as far as the rezoning of this lot. Is that correct, or are we?
It's proposed that if the application was approved, it would be conditioned on the re-subdivision of these two lots.
Okay.
That in order for it to be approved, that these two lots would have to be re-subdivided.
Okay.
It would not be a rezoning, it would just be a formal redrawing of the lot lines, between the two lots. And that would have to be approved by the city's planning department. I don't think this would go to planning commission. It would be approved once the documentation is prepared. Would be approved by the planning director, as well as our city engineer and water and sewer, and as you would any plat or any subdivision that came in.
And the property would remain zoned RS-15. No change is proposed there.
Okay.
Right. And it would not change covenants.
Okay. Well, my initial concerns, again, are the looks of this house that can fit on this lot because of the change in the structure. And I think as trying to keep a consistent look through the neighborhood, that's my main concern, what house is going to fit on this lot that's consistently looking with the other ones. And also, I feel like I don't want this to set a precedent for the neighborhood of asking for variances, to basically, cover mistakes. And that's my concerns with lot number 6. But like I said before, coming in today, I didn't realize number 6 was even a possibility of being redrawn. So.
All right. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? If you hang on one second, Mr. Hood, let me check and make sure there's nobody else that wants to speak.
I'll just do his one. My name's Heather Roberts. I live at 2129 Slater Drive. I have all the same concerns that these men do, so I'm not going to reiterate that. A big concern of mine is this man has stated that he has to re-subdivide his property because he was inconvenienced by the TVA power lines, the drainage ditch. He didn't do a survey. I understand all that, but he bought the property knowing that. And my problem is I have a whole field across from my house that has TVA lines stretched all the way across it. So if this gets approved today, this is setting a huge precedent that somebody's going to come in and say, well, I have these TVA lines coming across my yard where I want to build this house. I can't get it quite where I want it, or my house is too wide for the property. And they'll come back and do the same thing. This sets a terrible precedent because there's probably 10 lots over there that somebody could come in and do the same thing. In addition, our covenants for our neighborhood specifically say no lot shall be re-subdivided. And that's very clear. He says he's going to follow the covenants, and I understand he would like to try. I do understand he's trying that. But in our covenants, it says they shall not be re-subdivided. So that means they were set the way they were for a reason. In addition, I know he already answered this as far as, our concern is the aesthetics. He says he can still get a side entrance garage in. If he does that, how close are these houses? Our neighborhood is built with, obviously, the setbacks. Everybody else has followed them. Everybody else has followed the covenants, the restrictions, the rules. We have the setbacks for a reason. Keep the houses a specific distance apart, which adds consistency to the neighborhood. Now, if we re-subdivide this lot, all of a sudden we have two lots very close together. There is another option, which I know he does not want, which is he owns the lot, make it one big lot. Then you don't have the problem of two houses very close together, in addition to very close to the Birchfields lot, which is next to them. They live next to this, and they would have two houses extremely close together. So those are my concerns, and thank you.
Mr. Roberts, do you have the covenants with you?
Yes. Would you like to see them?
I would.
Yeah.
Like to see them. Is this the portion that prohibits the re-subdivision? Okay, thank you. All right, is there anyone else that present wishing to speak for or against the application? All right, seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed, and we will open the floor for further discussion or motion.
I would make a comment, and obviously I haven't read these covenants, but I have read a lot of covenants, and I think that the intent of this one would be that you cannot take a lot that is established here and break it up into two lots or three lots. Generally, that kind of a covenant would not prohibit and what I would call this, from my review of it, and you might disagree, but I would call this a minor adjustment between of an existing lot line to somewhat reconfigure two adjoining lots. I have seen a number of covenants that specifically say no re-subdivision, but that doesn't prohibit an adjustment of a line between lots, and not all of them do say that, but that would be my opinion as to what that would mean. And that's not binding on this board. Certainly it's not binding on a court or anybody else here listening to me.
You did a pretty good guess. In fact, you almost read it verbatim. It says, no lot shall be re-subdivided, but shall remain as shown on the recorded plat, and not more than one residence building may be constructed or maintained on any lot. A slight variance in the property lines may be made by adjacent owners, but not for the purpose of subdivision into more lots. Does any other board want to see it? Okay.
I have a question for, I guess, and I don't know what discussions that Mr. Rosenthal and the surveyor has had with respects to trying to remedy this, but one thought came to my mind, and not trying to complicate this matter, I'm just curious, and that is for the look of the subdivision in itself, if there was any thought process made of, again, I'm not trying to complicate things here, but making a request for two different variances. And what I mean by that is for lot 6 and 7, and try to split the difference in reference to the amount of room that you've got between the existing house that you've already started on 7 and what you would propose on 6. And that way, by splitting the difference in the room that you would have, you would give, I think, a better appearance with respects to the depth between those two houses. Do you follow what I'm trying to say?
We actually did consider that. I think we presented that to Matthew. Making it a larger setback on lot 6, so that it would be a similar separation. Correct. Instead of 12 and 12, it would be 7.5 and something larger. And we did consider that and actually presented it. Matthew said it wasn't necessary, but it might be something that we can do, I would think.
Right. Action on lot 7 doesn't affect the setback on Lot 6. The setback on Lot 6 is still what is prescribed by Chart 1 of the zoning ordinance. Now, if they had a house plan that, they could scoot over further and on Lot 6, I don't know if they do or not, or I don't know if they'll be utilizing the entire width of the building envelope on Lot 6. But as far as the proposed lot line location, that was where that was the farthest the lot line could shift over to the east and still maintain a lot width, the minimum lot width in the RS-15 zoning district for Lot 6. But that wouldn't preclude him from building a house on Lot 6 if there was a house plan that pushed it over away from that 12.5-foot setback line, if he was able to do that.
And that minimum lot size is not something that's possible for a variance or something like that if that's outside the scope of what we're doing.
That's correct.
Okay.
The minimum lots, the way in which someone can achieve a lesser lot size is by rezoning. That's not something that the Board of Zoning Appeals has the authority to grant a variance to a lesser lot size.
But Ken, what you're suggesting, though, is as Mr. Rosenthal said, just simply move the setback over so that these houses are supposed to be 25 feet apart, right, from one wall to the other wall. What you're saying is increase the setback on 6 where they would still be 25 feet apart, right?
I was actually going in the other direction, but I'm not sure after I've thought about it, it would have accomplished anything because you would have the same distance between the houses based upon what I was proposing. In the end, it's just the fact that you would have a different lot line. The distance would have not changed. Okay. Now that I've thought it through. Okay. It's just that the legal lot line would have changed, but they would be asking for two different variances, one for 6 and one for 7, and split the difference in reference to the lot line. Right. But really it hasn't accomplished anything per se because you still have the same distance between the two houses.
But now you didn't. That's not what you were saying. You were saying increase the variance on Lot 6.
We actually thought about that. We thought if that was an issue,
and that's something
talked
that
with Matthew, but I didn't know if we should take it any further. In other words, some zoning has maximum or minimum separation between houses where one side might be 3 and one might be 7. They used to have that in the old, like Stratford Hall and things like that. So basically, if you were looking for 25 feet and you had 7.5 already, you could possibly bump up the other one to make sure that you had the 25 feet. Now, I don't know if that's a possibility or not, but if that is something that we need to do, and there was a suitable house plan, I would think that that's a possibility. But
what that would do would reduce your building envelope as well, though, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
On Lot 6, which
Yes.
could reduce the number of houses that would be possible to build there, particularly with a side-facing garage.
Right. It would make the number of house plans limited, probably, because the house would have to be narrower. Yes.
And you probably have a square footage requirement in the subdivision that you have to meet.
Yeah, I would think that the house square footage problem would not be an issue because there's so many different house plans that I've seen builders work with to satisfy their clients. But that it may be something to think about. I don't know, Matthew. What is your spin on that?
Can we grant an application contingent not just on re-subdividing but also affecting another lot? I mean, I guess that re-subdivision by necessity would affect another lot. So I assume we could also affect another lot by increasing the variance, increasing the setback.
I think you could. You'd want to be careful of the unknown impact on it, and making it abnormally difficult to put a house plan on Lot 6 if that building envelope is too narrow.
So the building envelope, I can't tell, on Lot 6 as proposed, re-subdivided, can you tell how wide that is?
At what point?
At the front,
At the street?
yeah, closest to the street.
70, 26?
On Lot 6?
It's,
Right.
that would,
See, it's going from 62, they are, instead of a trapezoid like that, it's
70
two parallel means splits.
and I believe it's 75 feet at the setback, so that means at the setback, you take away the two 12.5-foot side setbacks, which total be 25, so you've got approximately a 50-foot wide building envelope
Okay.
on Lot 6.
And you would need another 18 feet taken off of that to increase the setback to get it back up to 25 feet.
An additional 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay,
you
so
got-
we're down to 60, 62, 63 feet. No, wait, no, we're down to
42.
42, 43 feet wide building envelope if we increase the size of the setback. What about that?
Well,
I thought the front.
Derek is the builder. He might know more about what, the choice of house plans, but it seems adequate, but I don't know. I'd have to look at what some of the other houses in the subdivision are really like, their dimensions. We wouldn't want it to be out of place, and and I'm sure that's one of the big concerns, is we want the house to be consistent with all the other houses.
Inconsistently spaced.
I think we added
Right.
it wrong.
Okay.
It maybe, it looks, am I in error that the front line is 70 and not 75?
I think the building envelope.
Yeah, Ms. King, it flares out a little bit the further you head away from the street, and the width at the 40-foot minimum building setback line
Okay,
is the operable.
I understand.
Is there, and this might not be in order, but is there a way to, I know there's a way to defer it, but is there a way to defer this and see if there would be an amicable plan design that would fit this lot based upon if we did make it a requirement to increase the setback in Lot 6, or is that a direction we want to even go in?
That's certainly an option. I think as far as time frame, I think Mr. Rosenthal or Mr. Alcorn would be better to respond to that.
I'm always here. It's Mr. Alcorn's probably more the victim of time than I would be. So as far as waiting for another meeting or waiting for additional plans and things, that would really be up to Derek as far as if that would work. And, I think it would be his decision. Derek,
Mr. Alcorn, is a 1-month delay something that you can live with? I'm sure you'd like to get this taken care of and move on, but could, if that is what the board, if the board would like to look at more options, can you live with that?
Yeah, after.
Okay. I think Mr. Alcorn indicated he would be willing to do that.
I have the same feelings for what it's worth. I have a tough time with just going with just the minimums when there are some options. And I realize there's some hurdles there to get everything coordinated, but hopefully it makes some sense to try to work through that over just like I said, just have a tough time with the minimum 5 feet there. So
sure. I think we could at least show some typicals, show some existing houses, what they may look like on that particular lot, the spacing between the houses based on what we have now, and see if those options are acceptable. If we have folks with issues, we really need to make sure that they're satisfied with that. So if that's not something unusual, is to let us have a little time to go ahead and prepare some things that everyone can take a look at. I think we can sure do that.
And I know the board would appreciate that, and I think we should talk about sharing that with the neighbors.
Absolutely,
for
yeah.
sure, that are here, and others that may not have been able to come, but maybe building some consensus
Yes.
about what
Yeah, that's
What this
as far as
turn out
I'm
to be.
concerned, I'm fine with that, yeah. I think it's a good idea, myself. I would like everyone to be satisfied in an instance like this. For people to not feel like anything's been bulldozed through, and that they've had a chance to look at it and agree with what he's asking for, sure, that's great.
Good deal. All right, thank you, Mr. Rosenthal.
Thank you.
Motion to defer. Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to defer action on this application
I'll second.
For 1 month.
For
for 1 month.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll consider that again in a month at next month's meeting. Thank you all. Appreciate your cooperation. Thank you, everybody, for being here and input on that particular application. All right, we'll now move on to special use permit and variance requests. First one there is application Z13060 by Mr. Sudhakar Reddy of New Concept Homes for Dr. Ravinder Manda. He's making the following request for property located in a residential single-family RS-15 zone. This is property located at 1475 Avellino Circle, which is in the Mirabella subdivision. First, a special use permit in order to establish an accessory apartment. And second, a variance from the City of Murfreesboro zoning ordinance, which states that an accessory apartment shall not exceed 700 square feet of floor area. All right, Mr. Blum, if you'd review that for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. The subject property is located at 1475 Avellino Circle, Lot 39 of the Mirabella subdivision. And you can see the aerial photo on the screen in front of you with the words site on it. The applicant is the general contractor for the house that is being constructed on this lot. The house was permitted in early August of this year and is currently under construction right now. The Building and Codes Department in early September received a plumbing permit request, and after receiving that plumbing permit request, the Building and Codes and planning staffs contacted the applicant, Mr. Reddy, and Mr. Reddy provided us with a copy of the house plans and the floor plans, and it was discovered that there was a second kitchen proposed, a second full kitchen. And after consultation with Mr. Reddy and his clients, and they explained the reason why they proposed a second kitchen in their home. The one kitchen was a larger, more formal kitchen that will be used for entertaining and won't necessarily be used for the heavy food prep. The second kitchen is actually kind of a working kitchen, where the heavy food prep will occur. And so the applicants are not actually even though the request is for an accessory apartment, it is an accessory apartment because it meets the definition in our zoning ordinance. They are not actually planning on having a separate dwelling unit for living purposes in their home. And I'll show you the plans. First, as you can see, there's a site plan with the house location. And then the floor plan. And this is difficult to see on here, but you do have the floor plans in your agenda materials. There is a proposed, the second kitchen is here. And in addition to the second kitchen, there is the master bathroom and the master bedroom. The second kitchen is here, right at the front left corner of the house. And the main, more formal kitchen is more towards the center of that first floor. And but if you isolated just the southern portion of the first floor, which only has one way in and one way out from the remainder of the first floor, doesn't have any exterior entrances, but it does have one door going into the main part of the first floor. It does have the master bathroom, the master bedroom, and the second kitchen. So if you isolate this southern wing of the first floor, it creates somewhat of an accessory apartment with regards to the zoning, even though the applicants do not plan on using it as a separate dwelling unit. So the applicants, after consultation with the planning staff, applied for a special use permit in order to establish that as an accessory apartment, even though they do have no intentions of using it as an accessory apartment. The second full kitchen is important to them, and we discussed ways in which they would not have to apply to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special use permit, such as taking the stove, the range out of that second kitchen, making it more of a wet bar area. But the second kitchen was very important to them, and they decided that the course of action for them to take to get what they desired in their residence was to make application to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And one of the things that we discussed was that the Rutherford County Building and Codes Department has also indicated that with the inclusion of the second kitchen, they would consider it a separate dwelling unit for the purposes of charging the county development tax as well, which is charged on a per dwelling unit basis. In addition to the special use permit request, the applicant is also requesting a variance to the minimum or to the maximum 700 square foot requirement for accessory apartments. When isolating that southern wing of the first floor and taking into account the kitchen, the bedroom and the bathroom and some other auxiliary closet space and rooms, that area is approximately 1,300 square feet. So they have requested a variance to that maximum 700 square feet of floor area. In requesting this variance, Mr. Reddy reiterates that the accessory apartment will be designed to be part of the principal structure and that it will also function as a part of the principal structure, as his clients have no intentions of using it as a separate dwelling unit. As I mentioned, there are no proposed exterior access points. Everything will be, or the accessory apartment will be accessed only via the interior of the first floor. And the accessory apartment appears to be compliant with all of the other additional standards as well. And the applicants are well aware that this cannot be used as a separate dwelling unit for rental purposes. A separate motion is needed for each request. If the board desires to approve the special use permit, staff recommends the following condition. A deed restriction must be recorded stating that the accessory apartment will not be used as a rental unit to non-family members and that it will be used in a manner consistent with the zoning regulations for accessory apartments. That's the condition that we have customarily required for accessory apartments. And basically it puts on notice any future property owners or future owners of this property that even though there is a second kitchen in the property or in the house, that it cannot be used as a second dwelling unit for rental purposes. Now I'll show you some photographs of the subject property. As you can see, the house is currently under construction. This is looking at the property to the north, the property to the south, and the property directly across Avellino Circle from the subject property. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Reddy is here as well if you have any questions for him.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions from Mr. Blomley?
Matthew, I was going to ask a quick question just for my information. Is it the fact that it's a second kitchen or a second kitchen that can be separated from the main house that was the tipping point for the accessory structure?
The second kitchen is usually what makes us look at it. And typically with most second kitchens, there can be some part of that of the structure that can be isolated and can be considered a separate accessory apartment. But the second kitchen is really kind of what throws up a red flag to us as far as we need to review this as an accessory apartment.
If there's some area to get to that second kitchen that wasn't a door or was an open wall, then it might not land itself in the accessory structure.
Well, I mean, we look at each request on its own merits, or we look at each situation on its own merits, but more often than not, the second full kitchen. Now, there are lesser type, wet bars, things of that nature that would not throw it into being an accessory apartment. But similar, there was about 3 or 4 years ago, there was another house in Mirabella that the gentleman had a large entertaining room above his garage. It was an open area with a big TV, but it had a full kitchen and it also had a bathroom in there as well. So it had all of the elements of a separate dwelling unit, even though he had no intentions of using it as a separate dwelling unit. So while we look at everything on its own merits, more often than not, the second full kitchen does kind of throw it into it being a separate accessory apartment.
Okay, thank you.
How is the square footage determined?
Well, I was able to isolate that southern wing, especially because you only have that one way in and out of that southern wing, and it has so when you take the perimeter of that southern wing, which has the bedroom, the bathroom, and the kitchen, it is approximately 1,300 square feet.
And that's including the laundry room?
Correct.
Have we, I get everything you said, and I understand why they're before us. But have we ever granted a variance to a 1,300 square foot or 600 square feet difference between what would be considered an accessory structure? I mean, have we gotten that high?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we had one in the one that I referred to earlier in this subdivision, which I believe was about 1,100 square feet, and then we had one in on Frank Robinson Drive. The name of the subdivision escapes me, but it's off of Osborne Lane, and that one was about 1,500 square feet.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Mr. Rady, anything you would like to add to the application? No, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Then at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward. All right. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion. Again, we have two components to this particular application, so we'll need to take those separately.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the special use permit, subject to the staff comments.
A second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. And next, consider the request for the the variance from Section 9D to A6.
I'll make a motion that we approve that variance from 700 square feet to 1,300 square feet.
A second.
Motion 2 seconds. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Reddy, that application has been approved. And we'll now move on to application Z13061 by Pastor Sean Moses for True Victory Outreach Church. He is making the following request for property located in a general office district at 507 North University Street. First is a special use permit in order to establish a church, and second, a variance from Section 9D2ZZ1 of the City of Murfreesboro zoning ordinance, which states that parking areas for institutional group assembly uses shall not be permitted in the required front yard. All right, Mr. Baum, if you'd review that one for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Subject property, as you mentioned, is located at 507 North University Street, zoned OGR. It's the site of an existing, or was developed as a medical office building, about 6,000 square feet, back in the 90s. And as being zoned OGR, a medical office building was a permitted use, or is a permitted use in that zone. The subject property is located on the block of North University Street that is north of East Bell Street and south of Greenland Drive. As I mentioned, the property was originally developed in the 1990s with a medical office. Prior to 2010, the property was zoned CMR, Medical District Residential. As previously mentioned, the site was developed as a medical office in the 90s. Medical office uses are permitted by right in both CMR and the OGR zones. This property was rezoned to OGR back in 2010 as a part of the city's comprehensive review of this area with the relocation of St. Thomas Rutherford Hospital. In the OGR zone, a special use permit is required to establish an institutional group assembly use, such as a church, and the applicants have recently purchased the property and are looking to establish a church in that facility, looking to retrofit that existing building developed as a medical office as a church facility. The subject lot is 0.41 acres in area, or 17,859 square feet, and the existing building is approximately 5,900 square feet. According to utility records, it has been vacant since approximately January 2012. The building, as you can see on the aerial photograph, is situated on the south side of the property, and there is parking along the north side of the property, as well as several parking spaces in front and to the rear of the existing building. The applicant is requesting a variance to the requirement that parking shall not be permitted in the required front yard. That's one of the standards in the zoning ordinance for institutional group assembly uses, and primarily the reason that he is requesting this is because the parking stalls are already existing, and as such he is trying to retrofit an existing facility, and the alternative to the granting of this variance would be the physical removal of these 6 spaces, which were legally established in the past with the development of the previous medical office use, which was a use permitted by right. The zoning ordinance requires 1 parking space for each 8 seats in the auditorium. With 80 seats proposed in the auditorium, the proposed use will meet minimum parking requirements. The site does have 19 non-handicapped parking stalls, as well as 2 handicap parking stalls. So the site will meet minimum parking requirements. One thing that I would mention, though, is that in the event of overflow parking, the applicant has gone the extra mile and secured permission from NHC to use its parking lot directly across the street on Sunday mornings and Wednesday evenings. You'll see on the aerial photograph that NHC owns the property directly across North University Street. And there's actually a crosswalk going from that parking lot to the subject property. And in addition, Pastor Moses provided to me before the meeting, and I'll pass this to you, but we will need to keep it for the record, a letter from Dr. McPhee at MTSU granting the church permission to use the MTSU parking lot, previously the St. Thomas Rutherford parking lot, to the rear of the subject property. You can see on the aerial photograph the former St. Thomas Rutherford, or MTMC property as it was called, just to the rear of the subject property. So the applicant, as I mentioned, has gone the extra mile and made provisions for overflow parking if he were to need it. The facility will be used primarily on Sunday mornings and Wednesday evenings, and the applicant has indicated that there will be no accessory child care on site. The church will give away food and clothes to the needy as an accessory use on the subject property 2 Saturdays a month. The applicant has stated that there will not be accommodations for RV hookups, nor will there be any external speakers. The church will use city carts to dispose of solid waste, and the carts will be located at the rear of the building. Because the applicant is not proposing any additional lighting, the applicant has not been required to provide a photometric lighting plan. The applicant has indicated that there may be some limited recreational activities at the rear of the site. However, the site is relatively small, so it doesn't have much room for any extensive recreational activities. The church intends to preserve as many of the existing plantings on site as possible. Staff does not believe that any additional landscape buffering or screening is warranted on this site. The uses in the subject area are primarily office in nature, although the structure directly to the north is a single-family home. It is vacant. And now I'll show you some photographs of the subject property. And here's the original 1995 site plan. I will mention that it is not, the site was not entirely built out according to this site plan, so you may see some discrepancies between the aerial photograph and this 1995 site plan. Here's the front of the subject building. You can see that there are several paved parking spaces in front of the building, the existing parking in front of the building, the existing parking lot on the north side of the building, parking spaces at the rear of the building, the neighboring MTSU property to the west, the neighboring property to the north, that's that vacant single-family home, the NHC parking lot directly across University, which they have gotten permission to use during service times, and the neighboring property to the south, which is a medical office as well. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Pastor Moses is here if you have any questions for him.
All right, thank you, Mr. Baumley. Questions for Mr. Baumley? So, Matthew, I understand then the exterior of the building stays the same.
That is correct.
The parking lot stays the same. We're just transferring it from an office, a medical office, to a church. I'm having a hard time locating this, you know. I mean, I know the general area, but so are you saying that the required parking is sufficient on property that they own?
That's correct.
This MTSU parking and the NHC parking is kind of over and above what is otherwise required.
That's correct. For the amount of seats that they have in the auditorium, they meet the minimum parking requirements on site.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Blomley? All right, Pastor Moses, anything you'd like to add to the application? All right, thank you. Then at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. All right, seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or a motion. And as before, we've got two components to this application, so we'll need to take those separately.
If no further questions, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the special use permit.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we'll now consider the request from variance section 9D2ZZ1.
Make a motion to approve the variance to allow the parking spaces in the required front yard.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Pastor Moses, that application has been approved. Thank you. Congratulations. All right, we'll now move on to special use permit requests. First is application Z13062 by Mr. Rob Phillips for Miller's Grocery. He's requesting a special use permit in order to operate a temporary outdoor vending establishment where he would sell food in a commercial highway zone located at 241 West Northfield Boulevard. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. As you mentioned, the subject property is located at 241 West Northfield Boulevard. Many of you may recognize this site as the location of the old Hollywood Video at the corner of West Northfield Boulevard and First Place. It's zoned commercial highway and is recently been purchased and is being renovated for use as a chiropractor's office by Dr. Mitch Stanley. The applicant proposes a temporary outdoor food sales site to be located at the north end of the parking lot. He has submitted a letter of permission from the property owner granting him permission to vend on the subject property, as well as a site plan and other supporting documentation. This site has never been approved for temporary vending. The applicant would like to be approved for operation beginning on November 14th, 2013, and ending on October 30th, 2014. And he has provided a calendar showing the 70 days that he proposes to set up. And As you recall, 70 days is the maximum number of days that a site can be used for temporary vending purposes that are not accessory to the principal use on the property. The proposed hours of operation will be from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. And I have double-checked with the chiropractor's office. They are open until 6 p.m., which means that the restrooms on site will be available to the applicant and his employees and customers. The business will be conducted from a 7x20 trailer, which will be removed from the premises at the end of each business day. The trailer will take up 1 to 2 parking spaces, and there are 48 parking spaces on site, so it will by far continue to meet the minimum parking requirements specified in the zoning ordinance. The applicant is aware that he cannot have any tables or chairs on site. He will dispose of any solid waste generated by the vending operation off-site, and he will use a generator for his trailer. He meets the minimum distance requirements from a fire hydrant. As I mentioned, he will have permission from Dr. Stanlick for the use of the restrooms in the permanent building. And one thing that I did want to mention is that the restrooms need to be available when the applicant is in business on the property. Dr. Stanlick's proposed first day of operation is November the 11th, and the applicant's first day of operation is November 14th, so that if all goes as planned, the restrooms will be available and the chiropractor's office will be open by the time Mr. Miller proposes to begin operation. However, if for some reason those restrooms are not available and the chiropractor's office has not opened on time, Mr. Miller is aware that he cannot begin operating until he has permission or until he has restroom facilities for his employees and customers to use. If the board approves this application, staff recommends the following conditions. The trailer must pass an electrical safety permit or electrical safety inspection prior to opening for business. An electrical permit must be purchased from the Building and Codes Department in order to obtain this inspection. And number 2, the time period of operation will be from November 14th, 2013 until October 30th, 2014. And I'll show you some exhibits. You can see here on the site plan the location of the proposed food trailer. It's approximately 45 to 50 feet from the front property line. And you'll notice along First Place, the fire hydrant is noted with the letters FH. There's a photograph of the proposed food trailer. Here's a photograph of the building at 241 West Northfield Boulevard, which is currently under renovations. Food trailer will be located here in these parking spaces. Looking east from the subject property, there is a tanning salon just to the east. Looking across West Northfield Boulevard to the north. And looking west from the subject property, there's a First Tennessee Bank. And with that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Phillips is in attendance, and I think I accidentally called him Mr. Miller earlier. But Mr. Phillips is in attendance if you have any questions for him.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bomley. Questions for Mr. Bomley? All right, Mr. Phillips. I almost called you Mr. Miller. Mr. Phillips, anything you'd like to add to the application?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you. Then at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Open the floor for further discussions or a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the application subject to staff comments.
Second.
Can I ask a question before we vote? I had to excuse myself for a minute. Did we talk about the hours of operation? 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.? Is that, so that's, okay.
Yes, sir. And I had mentioned that I have made contact with the chiropractor's office, and they are actually open until 6 p.m., so the restrooms will be available for the applicant's hours of operation.
Up to 70 days out of the year.
Yes, sir.
And I'm sorry, set days of week, is that in here?
The calendar looks mainly Tuesday, Thursdays,
Okay,
mainly exclusively.
all right, thank you. I'm done.
Good. Okay. All right. Then
Got a motion and a second.
we have a motion and a second? Okay. All right. Everybody ready to vote?
Ready?
All right. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Mr. Phillips, that application has been approved. Yes, sir. All right. We'll next consider application Z13063 by Mr. Mike Jones for North Boulevard Church of Christ Men's Ministry. He's requesting a special use permit in order to sell Christmas trees on property located at 1266 Northwest Broad Street. Mr. Blumley.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. This is the same application that we've had for quite a number of years, and the past 7 years, I believe, they've been coming to the Board of Zoning Appeals. This is the same location in the Kmart parking lot that next to the former Cornerstone Financial Credit Union that the applicant proposes to set up that he has on numerous years in the past. To my knowledge, we have not received any complaints about this operation in years past, and his application is identical to that of previous years. With that being said, if the board approves this application, staff recommends the following conditions. The site must pass an electrical safety inspection prior to opening for business. An electrical permit must be purchased from the Building and Codes Department in order to obtain this inspection. And number two, all temporary structures must meet the minimum building setback requirements for the CH zoning district. I'll be happy to answer any questions. And Mr. Jones, yes, he is still here. He is still in attendance.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blumley. Questions for Mr. Blumley? We did have a cleanup issue with this 1 year, didn't we? But it wasn't last year's, a few years ago. Am I remembering that correctly?
I don't recall if we have. It's possible, but I don't recall one.
It hadn't been recently.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. All right. Mr. Jones, anything you'd like to add to the application? All right. Then at this time, I'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would come forward. Seeing no one, declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
Mr. Chairman, if no further questions, I make a motion to approve the application with the conditions set by the staff.
Second.
All right. Have a motion and a second. Further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Ms. Jones, that application has been approved. Thank you. All right, we'll now consider application Z13064 by Mr. Dan Ongst for Boy Scout Troop 197, a Fellowship United Methodist Church. He's requesting a special use permit in order to sell Christmas trees on property located at 2511 New Salem Highway, which is a residential single-family RS-15 zone. Mr. Blumley.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. This, too, is identical to previous applications. The applicant has been approved at this location for the previous 5 years. You recall back in 2008, we amended our zoning ordinance to allow Christmas tree sales to be approved at institutional group assembly uses, even if they were zoned residential. In addition, last year we amended our zoning ordinance to waive the $500 deposit on such applications as long as the host, if you will, the institutional group assembly use, the permanent use on the property would take responsibility for the cleanup of the site. And Mr. Ongst has submitted a letter from the church taking responsibility for the cleanup of the Christmas tree lot. With that being said, the site will be operated essentially identical to in years past. The one change last year was that instead of the two 10-by-10 pop-up tents, he has an 8-by-8 portable building there adjacent to the Christmas tree lot, which was, I believe, the same thing that he did last year. But with that being said, the application is essentially the same as in years past, and if the board approves this application, staff recommends the following conditions, the same one as in the previous application with regards to the electrical safety inspection. And number 2, all temporary structures must meet the minimum building setback requirements for the RS-15 zoning district. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Ongst has been patiently waiting in attendance for his 2 items.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions for Mr. Blomley? All right. Patiently waiting. Mr. Ongst, anything you'd like to add to the application? All right. Good to see you, too. All right. Then at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would come forward. Seeing no one, declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motion.
If there's no further discussion, I make a motion to approve this application, subject to staff comments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Ongst, that application has been approved. We'll now consider your other application. It is Z13065 by Mr. Ongst for Boy Scout Troop 197 of Fellowship United Methodist Church, again requesting a special use permit in order to sell Christmas trees for property located at 1807 Memorial Boulevard. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. 1807 Memorial Boulevard is the location of the Haynes Hardware store located at the northwest corner of Memorial Boulevard and MTCS Road. And you have the aerial photo in front of you. The subject, or the area of the subject property that the applicant wishes to sell Christmas trees on is the area which formerly housed the nursery for Haynes Hardware on the south side of the building. You'll recall that in years past, we have had fireworks tents approved at this location. However, it's been several years, perhaps 3 or 4 years, since we've had a fireworks tent approved at this location. The applicant has submitted his letter of permission from the property owner, as well as a site plan and a letter addressing sections 8 and 9 of the zoning ordinance. And I'll show you the proposed layout. You'll see the Haynes Hardware, as well as a 30 by 40 tree display area to the south of the building, 2 10 by 10 pop-up tents, and a storage trailer to the rear of the lot for supplies. The applicant does also propose to include some traffic barrels or cones along the front side of the, or along the east side of the operation in order to make sure that there are no traffic issues as folks drive through that parking lot. The applicant has submitted a letter from the Hardys at 1851 Memorial Boulevard for use of its restrooms. And the Hardys, if you look at the site plan, is right just barely off of the aerial photo. It's about 500 or 600 feet away from the proposed Christmas tree sales area. There is an existing fire hydrant directly across MTCS Road within 200 feet of the sales area. The applicants will handle solid waste by keeping a garbage can on site and emptying it off site at the end of each business day. The applicant proposes to operate from November 29th until December 22nd. And the applicant stated that he expects to average between 8 and 10 customers per hour at a maximum, but no more than 4 or 6 customers on site at any given time. If the board approves this application, staff recommends the following conditions. The site must pass the electrical safety inspection, the same condition for the previous 2. And number 2, all temporary structures must meet the minimum building setback requirements for the CH zoning district. And if you have any, I've got some photographs of this site as well. The Haynes Hardware at 1807 Memorial. This is the side of the building where the tree lot will be located. Parking lot on the south side of the Haynes Hardware building. The seldom used area of the parking lot. Looking at the neighboring property to the west, which is a daycare. Looking across MTCS Road, which is a multi-tenant commercial building. And looking towards Memorial Boulevard from the location of the Christmas tree lot. We're looking at the Reeve Sane drugstore in the background there. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Ongst is available, as you know, to answer any questions that he may be able to answer.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Questions from Mr. Blomley? Mr. Ongks, anything you'd like to add to this one? Oh, happy to be here. All right, then. Okay. All right, then, at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or motion.
Mr. Chairman, if no further questions, I make a motion to approve the special use permit request, and with the conditions set by the staff.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Mr. Honks, that application has been approved as well. Good luck to you this year, and look forward to seeing you again next year. We appreciate your patience, too. All right. All right, now we're on to staff reports and any other business.
Chairman Rogers, my only thing that I wanted to mention was the fact that our meeting in December will be on Thursday, I believe Thursday, November the 21st, I believe. Because of the holidays, it's kind of on an odd date and time.
Thursday, December 21st.
No, Thursday, November 21st, excuse me.
Excuse me, Thursday, November 21st, okay. All right, I think we got it. Any other business? We're adjourned.